Hello, confident people, and welcome to another episode of our Entrepreneur Series. I'm your host, Dr. Jacqueline Jarl, also known as Coach JJ. In this series, I invite entrepreneurs from all walks of life to share their unique journeys. My goal is to challenge the traditional ways we think about work, money, and freedom, and to provide inspiration for you to regain your power and design a life you love. Now, today we have Chris Rivers with us, who is the author of You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead. Chris is also a fellow West Point grad and veteran. So, Chris, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Excited for this.
Of course. Now, without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to you so you can give us a broader introduction of you, your life, and what it is that you're doing now.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I started lower middle class family. No one in my family really gone to college, and I just knew I wanted something different than that. And I was also in high school when 9/11 happened, and I just wanted to serve our country. So I enlisted in the Connecticut Army National Guard, thinking I can go to UConn for free and serve my country after getting my commission and degree in some way, shape, or form. It just so happened, I ended up deploying to Operation Iraqi Freedom before ever going to college. And there I met a West Point officer who suggested I should take my SATs again and apply for West Point. And that fundamentally changed the entire trajectory of my life, where I got to go to West Point, studied physics and nuclear engineering, and was an Army engineer, led about 100 combat missions in Afghanistan, and ultimately coming out of Afghanistan decided I wanted to study how government worked, to understand how decisions were made. So I went to grad school and fast forward served in the State Department for 3 years, and then ultimately got out of government service and went into consulting, and been doing that, really trying to solve wicked problems is really my sweet area that I love to focus on. And ultimately moved back to my home state of Connecticut, got involved with local politics, and over the last couple of election cycles was on the front lines trying to run for office and trying to knock on doors and talk to people, not just about politics, but more importantly, I think, how can we use politics to actually solve problems for folks, which is the sort of entrepreneurial lens to politics that I think often gets overlooked. And just my experience on the front lines of politics taught me that we just aren't doing it right. We're doing politics in a way that isn't actually solving problems. We're doing it in a way that's actually creating more and more division. And so that's what the book is all about. And the book is sort of my latest journey into entrepreneurialism, where not only is it a book, it's also a marketing campaign where I'm out talking to people about, we all deserve better than what we have going on right now.
Yeah.
And that is part our own effort, it's part our own talent, but it's also part the systems in which we all live. And if I can help peel the layers back so people can understand the systems, so we can all be a part of making them more fair, more free, I think that's probably the direction we need to move in. So that's my sort of latest gig.
Okay, awesome. Now, obviously, being a veteran, I have to ask because I myself, if you read my book, right, you will know that I had a very tough time transitioning, and I was unemployed and not necessarily homeless, right? But I was staying with other people. I was staying at other people's houses essentially for about 6 or 7 months. So I wanted to chat with you about your transition journey, because it is a journey.
Yeah.
And kind of, what made you decide to get out? How did your transition go? And where did you end up?
Yeah, I decided, so I was leading a route clearance mission in Afghanistan, and one of my trucks got blown up. And it was 3 days into a 30-day long mission or so. And for 27 straight days, I had soldiers of mine asking me, why are we still here? 10 years after we invaded in the first place. And that's when I realized I actually don't have a good answer. I gave them the best answer any young lieutenant could possibly give out in the middle of Afghanistan, but it didn't satisfy my own curiosity. And that's where I just decided, regardless of what my life had in front of me, I wanted to go study that a little bit more. And I got lucky in that the Army brought me to DC for my tour as a captain to do sort of data science work. And so I was in the National Capital Region, which is lucky because it has so many great grad schools to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
And grad school for me was sort of the obvious path to go for getting out as a junior military officer without really knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to keep serving. I knew I wanted to keep trying to solve problems. I just also knew that my body could not keep up with the sort of demand that the Army was putting it through. Deployment after deployment, my deployments were not easy on my body in any way, shape, or form. And so being in DC, I just looked for graduate school programs that offered courses in how our government worked and how countries are supposed to interact together. And that ultimately led me to a dual master's degree at Georgetown, where they had one master's is a master's in public policy, and the other one's a master's in foreign service, or the old school way of saying international relations. And what I realized there, and the reason why I say I got absolutely lucky with this, is your ability to find what you want to do after you leave the military, whether you choose to leave, whether you got voluntold to leave in other situations, is the power of networking. Because I think in the Army, and this is like the thing I really had to overcome, in the Army, I think most of us kind of take for granted that if you're really good at what you do, you shouldn't have to network. Your work will speak for itself. You'll put in the hours, you'll show up early, you'll run a lot, and you'll be wherever your troops are, and you're leading by example, and your senior rater will just see that, and you'll be top lock. And for the veterans out there, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. For those non-veterans, let me translate that to just say, you expect your supervisors to see that you're doing good work and they judge you fairly for it. And the people who you see go around and actively network in the military circles kind of feel like it's not how the game's played. And it's just not really welcomed, especially for junior officers to do that. But then all of a sudden you end up in the civilian world, the entire world runs on networking. If you're not networking, you're being left out. And that was one of the things that Georgetown really taught me, and also taking an opportunity not to just go through the normal Army transition courses, but companies like Deloitte flew some of us down to their university in Dallas, Texas to teach us how to network, teach us how to do interviews, teach us how to write resumes. Because I never had to put my experience on a piece of paper before. I never had to ask and answer the question of, can you give me an example of a stressful situation you were in? And it's like, how do you answer that when the stressful situation was combat, but they're looking for like some team development time, right? And it's those sorts of things that until you go through it, you just don't know you don't know. And so go get the extra training. Don't rely on the basic Army transition training, and take advantage of all the opportunities there are. And one of the best pieces of advice I got was at Georgetown, one of my teachers said, you would be really good in international relations. And one of the best ways to learn in the State Department, where I ended up working for 3 years, was go apply for every opening they have and just go do every interview. And I quite literally went and did about 30 interviews, some of which I knew within 5 minutes. I had no desire to work in that part of the State Department, but I left knowing the State Department far better than most people ever will. And so just taking interviews that you know you probably don't want the job for, just using it as training is absolutely something worthwhile to do, so that when you do get that dream job that you really want, it's not your first rodeo.
Yeah. So, I love that, because back when I was still worked full time, for about 4 years, I ran the military recruiting department for my company. And I see this a lot, right, with veterans who I was trying to educate as well as trying to recruit, obviously, to my company. And a lot of the things that you said, I saw, and I didn't even know any of this myself when I was transitioning, completely, new kind of arena. But, one is that the networking piece is so critical. And I think for a lot of veterans coming out of the military, like, their idea of networking is, I'm going to hit someone up on LinkedIn, or I'm going to go to a conference, I'm going to find another veteran and tell them, hey, I'm also a veteran. And then they expect like the other veterans to be all in helping them find a job. Right. And I get this a lot, like on LinkedIn specifically, when I was back in that role, of people are like, hey, I'm also a veteran, or hey, I'm also a West Point grad. And then the next question that they would ask for me is, what roles do you have for me? Okay. Like, that is not networking. Like, just because you reached out to someone and sent them a message or said hi to them at a conference, like, that's not networking, right? Networking is more than a one and done thing, and it's not a what can you do for me type of idea, right? Which I think a lot of veterans, maybe it's a little bit better now because I do think from when I transitioned in 2013 to now, like there's been a lot of classes, a lot more nonprofits that actually teach the art of networking. But based on obviously you took some actual classes, like I've never had a class on networking, right? I just kind of learned in my 11-year corporate career.
Sure.
If you were giving advice to someone who is either looking to transition or recently transitioned but is still looking for a job, like what would you tell them? The one key thing about networking to help them be successful, like what would that be?
Ooh, one key thing: do your homework. And by that, I mean you don't want to waste people's time. If you're kind of blasting out, hey, you're a veteran, I'm a veteran, what open roles do you have? You're kind of signaling that you haven't done your homework, so you're not serious enough to even find the information that's already available.
Mhm.
Instead, if you take the approach of, hey, Coach JJ, we're both West Point grads. I love the article that you published on LinkedIn. I read it. I really thought it was insightful for this reason. If you have a few minutes, I would really love to pick your brain because I am trying to figure out how to navigate my next career step and just want to know what options are available to me and would love to hear more about your background. That should already signal that I did enough homework to read an article that you wrote. Flattery is never a bad thing to do. And oh, by the way, I'm not immediately asking for something other than a little bit of your time to hopefully have a really meaningful conversation. And
Mhm.
that's a lot easier to say yes to. So make it easy by doing your homework
Yeah.
to make it easy for them to say yes. If you're just saying, hey, what open roles, when you can literally just Google that, you're really not making it easy on them. And so all that comes from doing homework. And I'm probably a little bit biased because a lot of the networking I did was when I was in Georgetown in grad school. I was networking with like kind of legends in the international relations field, like
Mhm.
former cabinet secretaries and whatnot. You really don't want to waste their time. But it turns out they're actually people generally like to help other people, and particularly the more senior folks who are semi-retired and being like adjunct professors
Yeah.
love helping out younger folks. But make it easy for them. Do your homework 1st.
Yeah, 100%. And I can tell you, like, when I get a message that says, hey, I'm a veteran or I'm a West Point grad, and or like I went to USC or I also went to Vanderbilt, right? Like any kind of school connection or organizational connection, I should say, but I don't actually know you, and instead of like explaining what you're trying to do, right, and things like that, and then you just kind of throw in like almost a what can you do for me type of attitude, right? Or like what's out there type of attitude. I can tell you, like, I feel like you're trying to use me for personal gain without actually getting to know me, right? And like my job and my background and things like that. So obviously people don't like to feel used. So you have to build a relationship with people before you ask them for things. That's kind of like I always tell veterans this, like, don't just ask them, hey, what can you do for me, or like what roles are out there, who can you refer me to, right? These types of questions, but actually find out about their careers, their background, and things like that. I mean, you'd be surprised at simply listening to other veterans transition experience. Like, you would be surprised on how much you can learn from that experience.
That, and I also kind of think that's really stirring for me. A piece of advice I got is always be looking and asking questions about how you can help the other person, especially if you're
Yeah.
the one reaching out, right? So if I'm reaching out to you because I am interested maybe in an open role that you may or may not have,
Mhm.
hey, I do the initial reach out, and maybe we're talking, having that coffee session or having a virtual call like this. One of the questions I should really be asking, I think, as someone who reached out to you is something along the lines of, what keeps you up at night, or like what's the most difficult part of what you're currently doing,
Yeah.
with the intention of doing two things. One, learning more about what you do, because I may actually be interested in it. And you should always learn about the sort of downside of like what's the worst part about it.
Right.
Because everyone can tell you about what's fun and what's exciting and how much impact they can have. If you start asking about like, what do you just don't like the most about what you're currently doing, you actually get a lot more insight. But then two, if you're on this sort of networking train where you're doing a lot of this, hey, if you're really struggling with, I'm just going to make something up, finding a candidate for this one open role, even if it's one I'm not interested in. Oh, actually, I have a classmate who would be perfect fit for that. You want me to send you the resume? Now I'm helping you, and I'm the one that reached out to you, and now like that's a more meaningful way of me trying to look for ways to try to help you when I'm the one reaching out. And then you know what, like the natural sort of human psychology thing to do is, oh, I want to repay this person for helping me out, even if it wasn't all that helpful.
Yeah.
But like that's the sort of, I don't want to call it virtue signaling, but like that's just sort of what happens in normal relationships. Like if we all went back to our dating days, like it's not all I want this, I want this, I want this. That didn't really lead to any good relationship, and it's just about developing good relationships at the end of the day. So strip all the business stuff and what you want out of it. Just focus on building a new friend.
Yeah.
Then everything else will kind of take care of itself.
Nice. Awesome. So, I mean, at the risk of turning this entire session into a transition, a transition assistance, I wanted to ask you, like, how you even got to the State Department. Like, is it because you were in those classes and you met people? Because I know when I transitioned, like, I signed up with a military recruiting agency because I had zero clue on like where to even find jobs, what companies were even good for me, right? And I was also like I was an intel officer, so I legit did not even know like what I could do out in the civilian world because there is no intelligence equivalent, right, role. So how did you like even like able to like get interviews? Like, I mean, I don't think you just like applied online, right? Like, did you like how were you introduced?
Yeah, so it's funny. Whenever you're applying for a federal job, you will eventually have to apply online.
Yeah.
But if you're only applying online, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
So the way I got introduced is because I was at a grad school that had a lot of adjunct professors who were from the State Department. And I was literally in the least class you would expect, my ethics class that was being taught by my concentration chair. My concentration was global politics and security. And I did not really have an interest in global politics and security, but that was sort of the miscellaneous. If you just want to study international relations and kind of study all things international relations, that's your concentration. My concentration chair, Nicole Bimasadaka, great diplomat, great civil servant. And she just looked at my background, the conversations we're having in class, and saying, like, you actually have a science background, but you're studying international relations now. Let me introduce you to my friend who happens to be the science advisor to the Secretary of State, and just go grab coffee with them. And I was like, we have a science advisor to the Secretary of State? I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was a grad student just trying to understand like realism and liberalism and like the classic IR lenses that I forgot about from our social days at West Point. And all of a sudden it was just like, she sent the email literally while we were sitting in class. Hey, science advisor to the Secretary of State, this is Chris Rivers, one of my students. You two should meet up. I think you have a lot in common. And we did. And then he's the one that sort of taught me how the State Department's actually structured and what different bureaus might be a good fit for someone that has a science background but also studying international relations. And then ultimately, yeah, you do have to still apply online. But by the time I applied online, every hiring manager across the entire State Department got an email from someone senior up to say, look out for this guy.
Yeah.
That's sort of how you network your way into it.
Yep.
I got lucky because I went to a grad school program that was super connected with the State Department. And I got to pick their brains about what it was like to work there. And everyone has a different experience. It's a large organization, just like working for a large company. But at the end of the day, it's all about just being open with people who are looking to help you with what you're actually looking for.
Yeah.
And then they'll make connections that you have no idea that they even exist.
Yep. Yeah. The online application, I will say, is more of a formality, right? It's not your first choice to get a job. It's actually very rare if you're like you said, if you're only applying. This is true for government and or corporate. If you're just applying online, that is obviously not going to happen. Okay, so yeah.
I was just gonna add. I think it's because I did a little bit of. I was at Deloitte for a little bit of time, and I was doing recruiting out of Georgetown for Deloitte. And being on the corporate side of it, you know, a company like Deloitte, if you hire a bad person or someone that just doesn't fit, like there's ways that Deloitte's always kind of letting people go. So it's not as big of a risk. In the federal government, it's almost impossible to fire someone. So they are really selective and careful about who they bring in. So yeah, it's actually even more important if you want a government job to know people who are doing the hiring.
Yeah.
In the corporate world, they have more levers. In the government world, at least on the civil service side, before you get to the political appointee level, you absolutely have to network your way into it.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to talk about the entrepreneur side, right, of the house, obviously, given that this is the entrepreneur series. So I know that earlier you told me after the State Department, you essentially went in and became a 1099 as a consultant. Is that correct?
Yep,
Yeah.
that's correct.
So, I'm most interested, given the background of my coaching services, I'm most interested in the financial side of starting your own business as a consultant, right? Like, how did you prepare for that? Were you eating ramen, peanut butter, and jelly for months before you were able to get business? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. One, when you strike out on your own, there are all of a sudden a whole bunch of risks that you didn't realize you already had. And by risk, I mean, even when you're working for the federal government, when you're working for a big company, you kind of think your paycheck is steady, but you're one financial crisis that you have no control over away from them laying a whole bunch of people off, right?
Yeah.
So you actually do have that risk. So the first thing is just basic finances, which is have an emergency fund, have that emergency fund well funded, so you're not sweating.
Yeah.
6, 8, 9, 12 months, whatever is right for you, that you have some glide paths. So if everything goes wrong, you're not going to be out of your house, out of meals and whatnot. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, it is still a leap of faith, right? It's a leap of faith that you are actually worth enough to earn wages directly from folks and not having to rely on some massive infrastructure. It's also a massive hustle. And the thing I found is managing that sort of downside risk of everything going wrong means not putting all of your eggs into your consulting basket. So that if you don't get any clients for 3 or 4 months, or it's just not working, that you have some other revenue streams. For me, that was a combination of rental property that we made good investments in early on. So we were a little bit lucky there that it was already bringing in just a little bit of profit that helped the sort of overall cash flow. And then it was also taking classes on how to have our money that we already have work for us better. So doing things like options trading.
Yeah.
If you're going to go down that road, study it, practice first, not financial advisor. But there's things that you can do to make your own money that you already have work for you far more effectively. But you have to actively manage it. But just building those two other income streams meant that the actual pressure to produce clients and a certain revenue stream was way off. And so it's kind of just icing on the cake, which is so good for the mental health side of it. To say, every new client I get, I'm just interested in helping them. I have a whole lot of negotiating room to be able to offer discounts to get this going because I'm not absolutely relying on it. And so now it's just icing on the cake for all the extra revenue I bring in. I think people who try to launch it and just say, all my eggs are in this basket, and you are eating ramen, and all of a sudden you can't afford your rent, that's when it becomes really hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And like entrepreneurship is hard, right? I think a lot of people get this, and I see this online a lot, right? Where people are like encouraging other people to quit their full-time job and start a consulting business or start whatever business, right? And it's like entrepreneurship is hard. Like you don't have obviously the safety net, right? That you do in corporate. You're not in corporate. You're not dependent on getting one client or getting another client. I mean, maybe if you're in sales and you're commission only, right? Yes, that is somewhat of equivalent, right? Where it's like, well, if you don't sell something, you don't get to put food on the table. But it is like, I think a lot of people are led astray by a lot of different coaches, quote unquote, in the online world today, like 6-7 figures. Like it might take you 5 years to get to that, or longer, right?
And you may never get there. Like there are some really good businesses that just don't work for reasons beyond your control. And one of the best pieces of advice I got that I share is, you can start your business before you leave your previous job.
Yes.
There is no reason not to.
Yes.
Unless, I mean, you may have a contract that says no outside work. Outside of that, there's really no reason not to nowadays. Most people have some sort of side hustle.
Yeah. And it's still like, for me, right, my goal was not to work more or not to work forever. So my main focus was on passive income. And that's kind of what led to me being able to retire at 38, because I have put enough in my retirement through the 11 years that I was in corporate, maxing out 401k, maxing out Roth IRA, right? And we had a really good employer match as well that added to that. But like, yeah, like retirement funds are great, but you can't touch them until 59 and a half, right? So that's the other thing that I think people miss out on, is they're like, oh yeah, I want to quit working. And really all they do is they think about the retirement piece of it. They don't think about the additional income, the revenues that you were talking about, right? Additional streams of revenue, like maybe a real estate, or some sort of other like interest or dividend income. And really people, when they think about income, they're mainly thinking about trading time for money, right? That's what they're setting up. Like when you open your own business, like you're actually going to be spending more time trying to get clients than probably what you are doing in your full-time job. So if your whole goal is, I want to spend more time with my kids, or I want to have more flexibility, and you don't have passive income, or you don't have additional streams of income that don't require like working hours, then entrepreneurship is probably not gonna do for you what you think it's going to do for you, right?
I think that's so right. And I would be remiss. I speak French, and so entrepreneur is actually a French word, which quite literally translates to risk taker. And I think that's something that we overlook in our society. Is all the buzz online is anyone could do this.
Yeah.
And especially with all these new AI tools, anyone could build an app, anyone could do this. And that's all true. But just know you're taking on the risk to make it work yourself. And you can really minimize that risk by starting before you let your other job go, by having other revenue streams. And the point that you said, and I know I read in your book, is sort of, and you can live a Spartan lifestyle and really save up a lot. I think we all in our culture here in America kind of get into this keeping up with their neighbors and wanting the bigger house, the nicer car, whatnot. And for people who may be listening to this who have a big family or like are already struggling, I know what I'm about to say is not for everyone. But one thing that my wife and I think did well financially speaking is we kind of decided we wanted to live like lieutenants until we were financially independent. That meant we lived in apartments for much longer than all of our peers. It meant we have cars that are 10 years old, even to this day. It meant a whole bunch of things that were outside the norm for what all of our neighbors were doing. But, and this goes back to my point of like taking a class by former Wall Street bankers to learn investing for the first time. And once you learn the sort of compounding over time value, then the choice between, do I want the new car? By the way, I like nice things. I have nice golf clubs. Do you want a new car? Like right now. Like I still want those things, but it also resets your mentality between, do I want that now, or do I want the money I have in my account who's already compounding, give it a little more time to compound so I can buy it without even flinching about it.
Right.
Like that's a sort of trade-off that you're really talking about. And in our society, everything you get hit with, all the advertisements, everything is you want it now.
Yeah. It's buy now, pay later, right? Like
100%.
Yeah. Four payments of X dollars, right? And I mean, even credit card debt, right? Like most people just treat their credit card limit like that's their money. Like that's not your money. That's the bank's money that they're lending to you at 20 to 30% interest. It's this whole like consumer. It's the whole consumerism, right? Like the more you buy, the better off you are. Or people will think the better off you are, but you're actually not better off because now you're buried in debt. I recently launched a book as well, and it's about my memoir, right? So it is my memoir, so it's about my life. So I feel like that was like more of just me telling the story of my life. But your book is not a memoir and actually has like a lot of research going into it, right? So I'm always curious, like what made you want to write a book that's like a educational book that's not a memoir? I'm always very curious on people who write things like that outside of like PhDs, right? Because that's their research and it makes sense. So what made you want to write this book?
Yeah, I was given some advice along the way back when I was a grad student that said, if you haven't written down your train of thought, you haven't really thought it through.
Mm.
And that was sort of from a speech writing perspective. So people have these really strongly held beliefs, but you don't quite know why you have them. And the recommendation is always write it down and figure it out and connect all the dots. And for not just this past election, but for several elections, and this is not a partisan thing, I haven't met a single person along my journey that thinks like this is as good as it gets. Like I think we can all see that it could be a whole lot better. And I just let my engineer self, my consulting self, like go wild to connect all the dots, to really peel back how the systems that we have that control a lot of our daily lives, the economics, the political systems, the systems we have to say like what team are we on and why are we so divided, all this stuff, and just sort of take a consulting approach and peel it all back to core principles and just explain it to people. Having a world class education doesn't really do me any good if I can't use it to help people. And when I was looking at all that, and I really did not think my journey was going to end up with writing a book. I thought it was a mental health exercise for myself to just get it out of my head and try to figure it out. And then I shared that with some close friends, and they're like, oh, actually, this is really important and impactful. And when I heard that from people who were both Democrats and Republicans, like, oh, maybe I really should look about like what it would take to put this into a book. Then I got some professional help with editors to like really turn it into a true book that anyone could digest. And that started me on the journey of writing the book in the first place. But the origin of it is just me looking around saying, I think we can do better than what we're doing. I think we can actually solve some of these problems we've had for decades. And the fact that we're not using politics to actually solve any problem whatsoever is deeply concerning. And like, let me just try to figure out how that all connects. That's where it started from.
Okay. And so as far as like the audience for your book, like who is your target audience?
So I really was picturing the sort of people who are already doing podcasts, the sort of commentators I always just heard of and hear their content and just think like this is so surface level. It's not getting to the root causes ever. It's just a constant. It's almost. I live in Connecticut. We have ESPN for those who love sports. ESPN used to be nothing but sports, and then it turned into 15 seconds of sports and 3.5 minutes of people in their opinion about the sport they just watched.
Yes.
And we're kind of doing the same thing to politics, right? It's like 30 seconds, if that, of something, and then hours of just editorial debate opinions afterwards that never actually get down deep. So at the end of the day, when I was just writing the book, I was like, these people need to start talking about the root causes in a way that Americans can consume, because 67% of Americans get their political news on social media now. These sort of alternate independent media sources, whatever you want to call them, is the main way people are getting informed. And if we never get past the high level talking points, again, I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever, don't vote, great. I think we can all learn more about how this stuff works and start being better customers to start demanding better content that is actually getting to the root causes. And so my target audience when I first started writing this book was to the people who are already in this space, who are already talking about it, but maybe don't have the education I got, or maybe don't know how to talk about it, or even the political elected officials we have across the political spectrum who are honestly professional fundraisers, because that's how we create this political system we have now. And they're not necessarily experts on what they're legislating on. And I get it. And I don't hold anyone at fault for that necessarily, but I just think like everyone needs to up their game. And so when I was writing for them. But the secondary audience, which isn't really talked about with being an author, but is always talked about when you're giving a speech. Because when you're giving a speech, you have the people in front of you or the people you're immediately talking to. And then you have the recording, and like who else is watching is always of mine. And so the secondary audience, I wanted to write this for every American, regardless of how educated someone is, to just ground it in really layman terms of this is how this stuff works. It's not rocket science. And if you pull the curtain back and pull all the jargon away, the concepts aren't really that complicated. And once you simplify it on down, you can make up your own mind what you want to believe in what is the right answer. But at least you're making a decision for yourself, and you're not just constantly getting emotionally triggered because what you're seeing on social media, you love it or hate it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the key word is emotional trigger, right?
Yeah.
And right now it's election season. In Texas is midterms, right? This is March of 2026, and like I've literally stopped watching my local channels because like local news and things like that, because it's literally just political ads that play at your emotions, right? Like, it's so like, I'm trying to relax, right? This is the 5 o'clock, like the 5 p.m., 6 p.m.
Yep.
news. And I'm trying to wind down and relax before dinner so that, you know, you can get into a calm state of mind and have a good night's sleep. And it's just like all these things that's being thrown at you, all these graphics, you know, and things. And I'm just like, I can't even handle it right now. And it just like, it shouldn't be like that. Like I should not have to live, right, and be like, oh, I can't even watch the news now because of all these ads that are coming up. That's literally triggering an emotional response, and a psychological response, right, in me. Anyway, but that's, you know, I feel like that's like a whole other topic for mental health, right, and all of that. And similar to you, like I think you said this was more of a mental health exercise. And I wrote in my book as well, like my book also started out as a mental health exercise, mental health homework actually from my therapist, right? To be like, hey, I really think you need to write these things down because you have a lot of things bottled up from decades of, you know, military service and trauma and this and that, right? And things like that. So, I mean, I do recommend, not everybody needs to write a book, obviously, but I do, you know, 100% recommend, maybe it's journaling. If you don't like the word journaling, maybe it's just, I don't know, you can dictate. Like I found this feature in Word when I was actually in grad school, where you can like dictate, right? Like there's like a little microphone and you can just say your thoughts onto paper or into the computer, and it'll literally type it out for you, and then you can come and organize it later. But I do think it helps a lot for you, you know, to write down or to say out loud and see it on paper, like what it is that you're going through, how you're feeling about it, what you want or need to do about it. You know, again, for I think most people, you know, that come with some sort of, whether it's childhood trauma or military trauma, or maybe it's, you know, trauma from like you experienced a car accident, right? I mean, there's so many different things, like online bullying, right? There's so many different things that causes mental health stress nowadays. I do, you know, highly recommend that you either write it down or you say it out loud into something that can record it for you so that you can come back later, and essentially like it's like therapy for me, right? So I do really recommend that. Okay, now back to your book. So so you wrote this book. How has it been different, like being the entrepreneur of selling this one product that you made, that you wrote yourself, versus like I'm a consultant and I'm out trying to sell essentially myself, right? You're selling your own services, and your knowledge, as a consultant, versus now I have this one product that I'm trying to sell. And any difference there?
I would just push back a little bit and say, yes, there is one product in the form of the book. What I have learned is, as much as you can get really fixated on that and book sales and whatnot, and I am tracking that, and I am doing a whole bunch of podcasts and start my own YouTube channel to help push that as well. But it's also, putting a book out there is also the ultimate business card. I am an expert in this space. I am also a consultant. And if you're interested in trying to solve the problems I write about, who's better as a consultant to hire than the person who published an entire book on it?
Yeah.
And that's where it's been a really interesting cross-pollination between the two worlds I have lived in terms of recently being an author, but also having been a consultant in the past. And so there's in my case, an entirely new generation of Democrats and Republicans across this country who are eager to make politics actually work better than they have been.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to break through. They don't know, or they don't understand how politics work and how much money plays a role in it. Or if they did break through, they know they're not experts in whatever they would feel comfortable being expert in. And so there's sort of the campaign side of politics, of how do you actually win an election, which I can certainly help on because I've lived it and have been the candidate, and that's a sort of unique vantage point to study campaigns from.
Yeah.
Then there's also the, once you're elected, what do you actually do to solve problems side of it? And a lot of people who are business people, a lot of people who or concerned parents or whatnot are not necessarily experts in how government works. And so they're not experts in how to change it to make it work better. And so at the end of the day, the book is meaningful for it to stand on its own and to be its own product for sure. But I think it works most effectively when you think of the book as the ultimate business card to unlock a whole bunch of other opportunities. And it's interesting, when I was doing pure consulting work, it was kind of like, here's my niche.
Yeah.
And I can almost copy and paste the same scope of work, same
Yeah.
approach, same methodologies. It would slightly change, but like it wasn't super complicated. Now the sort of opportunities are coming my way. It's all over the map, and it's actually like really energizing all over again, because there's some organizations that want a traditional speaking engagement, which you can earn thousands of dollars for, by the way.
Yep.
There's also other organizations that want you to come to really debate them. There's other organizations that want you to come to run workshops to train people, and all of it's fun and exciting, but it also just opens up such a new aperture, a new market, a new approach to doing business that I never would have known before.
Amazing.
But most authors who make money from being an author, especially in the nonfiction world, I've learned recently in the last couple months, don't actually make a ton of money off of book sales. You make a ton of money, or you could make a decent amount of revenue off of speaking engagements, workshops, all that other stuff that comes along with it. So it goes back to just being like the world's best business card.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So the books themselves is not a massive revenue generator. I would say, obviously, if you end up writing a book and it's like I don't know, hits like the bestseller list, and then maybe there's a potential for it to be like your actual stream of income. But would you say, like, this is for everyone out there who has a specialty in something that is looking to write a book, right? Would you say the book is probably not gonna like be your main source of income, but what the book can lead to, like the speaking engagements, like the consulting or coaching contracts, that's where kind of that, the book could help you with that?
Yeah. Would it be helpful to break down some numbers?
Yeah, sure.
Or is that too? So
Yeah.
There's, first and foremost, and I got really lucky because in my network I had published authors who taught me how the sort of publishing world works.
Nice.
In the publishing world, you can choose to go traditional publishing, in which you would write your manuscript and you would hire or source it out to a literary agent who would then try to sell it to a publishing house, the traditional Random House, Penguin, one of those. And in that case, the way that the business model typically works is that publishing house says, hey, we're willing to publish this. They pay the author in advance. If you're a first-time author, 5-10 grand, it's not much. And then they get a lot of the editorial control. They decide ultimately what the cover is. You as the author have input, but they kind of buy your intellectual property from you. And they then put their entire publishing house to work, like 3 rounds of editing, yada, yada, yada. You eventually get to the book, and then your book, when it's sold, you as the author, it would be in your contract, gets like $1, maybe $2 of royalties for every book sold. But you don't see a dime of that until you earn your advance back, and most authors never see anything beyond their advance. So that's one style of publishing.
Do you own the rights to your book, or does the publishing house own the rights?
The publishing house owns it at that point. And most authors don't see the advance back, and if the publishing house says, hey, this marketing isn't worth it, like they can pull the plug, and there's only so much you can do as the author. It also takes about 2 years to go through that entire process on average, from what I understand. You can self-publish, in which you just freelance folks, or you can sort of do hybrid publishing, where you, as the author, pay a team for people like editors and cover design folks to help you with it. I went the hybrid publishing route, and in that world, you as the author pay for their services, and you work with the team. You get a whole lot more input. You get every final decision. You ultimately own the intellectual property. So if your book is ever made into a movie, or if all that revenue is coming to you, and per book sold, I think my margins are something like roughly around $5 per book sold for print versions, and more for digital versions. And there's no advances. The advance is whatever you paid. So all that instantly is starting to become revenue. And then if you ever want to adjust, if you want to add a new forward, if you want to redo the cover, that's totally up to you as the author. But all that to say, let's just take $5 a book per book sold, which is pretty decent considering how much of cost there is for printing and shipping and all that stuff. All right, $5 per book sold. a single speaking engagement could easily get you $5,000
Yeah.
for like 90 minutes of talking.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you sold 1,000 books, which is decent, I think the average book sales is like in the hundreds.
Yeah, hundreds.
at maybe,
Yeah.
even if it's that much. So you would have to sell thousands upon thousands upon thousands of books to be able to equate to the sort of consulting fees or speaking fees.
Yeah.
With that being said, people actually buying your book, engaging with it is like how you build a loyal following. So it's not, there's other value to it, but yeah, those numbers to me really dictate if you're trying to do this for a pure money making perspective, then you should really focus on the sort of business that comes after it, not just, and like the book is a step along the way, not the end you're trying to work for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Amazing. Okay. So to wrap us up here, first of all, you mentioned that you have a podcast on a YouTube channel.
Yep.
Okay. What is like, where do we find you? What's the podcast name?
Yeah, so you can either just search Chris Rivers, or you can search Building a Better Future or Reimagining America. If you search any of those three, it will come up.
Okay, great. And then if people wanted to get in touch with you specifically for either consulting services, right, or any other thing, where do they go find you?
So you can email me directly at chris@chrisrivers.com, or if you can't remember that, chrisrivers.com, the website.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Chris, for being on with us today. I mean, we talked about a whole bunch of things from military transition to how to publish a book, to entrepreneurship. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights with us today.
No, happy to, and always happy to connect with old friends and old grads, and go Army and beat Navy.
Yes, go Army, beat Navy, always. Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you.